Hello, darlings. Hello. Welcome to the Gentleman Psychic. I have to go over and do all of my Facebook shares, but first I have to just say goodnight to a friend. I need to run as I am going live on YouTube. Let's catch up. There we go. Okay, now that I'm live on here, I have to go over here and find that video. Let's see, where is that video? I'm live now. Oh goodness, that's not very pretty. I will share this. How do I do that? How do I share that? Why can't I remember? Oh, live chat, that's why. Copy link. And then we'll go over here to the Facebook page. And we will put a post here. Let's see. Create a post. Sorrows of Satan. I know it's kind of boring, right? To see me sort of just do social media. But it's what happens when you're a one-man operation. Okay, publish that one. And then I have to share that one to my other Facebook page. There we go, share that one, right post. Newsfeed, join me live. Post. Okay, and now because I never know. Oh goodness. Well, I was hoping, oh, you know what? I think if I go over here and I click that off, and now I can turn up my volume in case the internet goes out again and I get stuck in this book and I'm reading and reading and reading, and I don't get back to where we are. At least this way, my lovely fans can text me and it might ping on me. I hope so. Let's see. Okay, well, welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. I am so glad to have you here with me today. We are continuing our classic literature on Tuesday nights, and we are doing The Sorrows of Satan. Oh, chapter 15. That's where we are now. After the evening, I became a regular and welcome visitor at Lord Elton's house, and was soon on terms of the most friendly intimacy with all the members of his family, including even the severely pious Miss Charlotte Fitzroy. It was not difficult for me to see that my matrimonial aspirations were suspected, and though the encouragement I received from Lady Sybil herself was so slight as to make me doubtful whether, after all, my hopes of winning her would ever be realized, the Earl made no secret of his delight at the idea of securing me as son-in-law. Such wealth as mine was not to be met with every day, and even had I been a blackleg the turf or a retired jockey instead of an author, I should, with 5 millions at my back, have been considered quite as desirable a suitor for Lady Sybil's hand. Ximenes scarcely ever went with me to the Eltons now, pleading as excuse much pressing business and many social engagements. I was not altogether sorry for this. Greatly as I admired and honored him, his extraordinary physical beauty and fascination of manner were in dangerous contrast to my merely ordinary good-looking personality, and it seemed to me impossible that any woman, seeing much of him, could be expected to give me the preference. All the same, I had no fear that he would ever voluntarily become my rival. His antipathy to women was too deep-rooted and sincere for that. On this first point, indeed, his feelings were so strong and passionate that I often wondered why the society sirens who eagerly courted his attention remained so blind and unconscious to the chill cynicism that lurked beneath his seeming courtesy. The cutting satire that was coupled with apparent compliment, and the intensity of hatred that flamed under the assumed expression of admiring homage in his flaming eyes. However, it was not my business to point out to those who could not or would not see the endless peculiarities of my friend's variable disposition. I did not pay much heed to them, even so far as I myself was concerned, for I had grown accustomed to the quick changes he was wont to ring on all the gamut of human feelings, and absorbed in my own life schemes, I did not trouble myself to become my fidus actates. I was engrossed at the moment in doing all I could to increase the Earl of Elton's appreciative sense of my value as a man and as a millionaire. And to this end, I paid some of his pressing debts, lent him a large sum of money without demanding interest or promise of repayment, and stocked his cellar with presents of such rare old wines as he had not been able to afford to purchase for himself for many years. Thus was coincidence easily engendered between us. Thus was confidence easily engendered between us, even to that point of affection, which displayed itself in Lordship's readiness to thrust his arm around mine when we sauntered together down Piccadilly, and his calling me my dear boy in public. Never shall I forget the bewildered amazement of the scrubby little editor of the Sixpenny Magazine, who met me face to face, thus accompanied in the park one morning. That he knew the Earl of Elton by sight was evident, and that he also knew me, his apoplectic stare confessed. He had pompously refused to even read any of my offered contributions on the ground that I had no name. And now he would have given a month's salary if I had but considered to recognize him. I did not so condescend, but passed him by, listening to and laughing with my intended future father-in-law, who was retailing an extremely ancient joke for my benefit. The incident was slight, even trumpery, yet it would put me in good humor, for one of the chiefest pleasures I had out of my wealth was the ability to repay with vengeful interest all the contempt and insult that had beaten me back from every chance of earning a livelihood while I was poor. In all my visits to the Eltons, I never saw the paralyzed Countess again. Since the last terrible visitation of her dread disease, she had not moved. She merely lived and breathed, no more. Lord Elton told me that the worst part of her illness at present, so far as it affected those who had to attend upon her, was the particularly hideous alteration of her face. The fact is, he said, not without a shudder, she's dreadful to look at, positively dreadful, no longer human, you know. She used to be a lovely woman. Now she is literally frightful. Her eyes especially. They are as scared and wild as if she had seen the devil. Quite an awful expression, I assure you. And it never alters. The doctors can do nothing, and of course it's very tiring for Sybil and for everybody. I assented sympathetically, and realizing that householding such a figure of living death within it must of necessity be more or less gloomy and depressing to a young and vigorous nature, I lost no opportunity in giving Lady Sybil whatever slight pleasures were in my power to procure for her distraction and entertainment. Costly flowers, boxes for the opera, and first nights at play, every sort of attention that a man can pay a woman without being considered officious or intrusive, I offered, and was not repulsed. Everything progressed well and favorably towards the easy attainment of my wishes. I had no difficulties, no troubles of any kind, and I voluntarily led a life of selfishly absorbed personal gratification, being commended and encouraged therein by a whole host of flatterers and interested acquaintances. Willowsmere Court was mine, and every newspaper in the kingdom had commented on the purchase in either servile or spiteful paragraphs. My lawyers had warmly congratulated me on the possession of an admirable property of which they, in strict accordance with what they conceived to be their duty, had personally inspected and approved. The place was now in the hands of the firm decorators and furnishers recommended by Jimenez, and it was expected to be in perfect order for my habitation in early summer, at which time I purposed entertaining a large house party for more or less distinguished people. Meantime, what I had once considered would be the great event of my life took place, namely, the publication of my book. Trumpeted forth by the most heraldic advertisements, it was at last launched on the uncertain and fluctuating tide of public favor, and special advance copies were sent to the office of every magazine and journal in London. The day after this was done, Lucio, as I now familiarly called him, came into my room with a mysterious and mischievous air. "Geoffrey," he said, "I'm going to lend you £500. I looked up with a smile. "What for?" He held out a cheque towards me. Glancing at it, I saw that the sum he mentioned was filled in and endorsed with his signature, but that the name of the person to whom the money was to be made payable had not yet been written. "Well, what does it mean?" "It means," replied he, "that I am going to see Mr. McWing this morning. I have an appointment with him at 12. You, as Geoffrey Tempest, the author of the book of Mr. Wing is going to criticize and make a boom of, could not possibly put your name to such a check. It would not be in good form. It might crop up afterwards, and so betray the secrets of the prison house. But for me, it is another affair. I am going to pose as your businessman, your literary agent, who pockets 10% of the profits and wants to make a big thing out of you. And I'm going to talk the matter over with the effectually practical McWing, who has, like every true Scot, a keen eye for the main chance. Of course, it will be in confidence, strict confidence," and he laughed. "It is a question of business, you know. In these commercial days, literature has become a trade like everything else, and even critics only for what pays them, work for what pays them. As indeed they should, should they not?" "Do you mean to tell me McWing will take that 500? I asked dubiously. "I mean to tell you nothing of the kind. I would not put the matter so coarsely for the world. This money is not for McWing. It's for a literary charity." "Indeed," I thought. "You had an idea, perhaps, of offering a bribe." "A bribe? Good heavens! A bribe? Bribe a critic? Impossible, my good Geoffrey. Such a thing has never heard of. Never, never, never." And he shook his head and rolled up his eyes with infinite solemnity. "No, no. Press people never take money for anything, not even for booming a new gold mining company, not even for putting in notice of a fashionable concert into the Morning Post. Everything in the English press is the just expression of pure and lofty sentiment, believe me. This little cheque is for a charity of which Mr. McWing is chief patron. You see, the civil list pensions all go by favour to the wrong persons nowadays. To the keeping of a lunatic versifier and retired actress who never could act, the actual bona fide genius never gets anything out of the government, and moreover, would scorn to take a farthing from that penniless body which grudges him anything higher than a money recognition. It is as great an insult to offer a beggarly pension of 50 or £100 a year to a really great writer as to give him a knighthood, and we cannot fall much lower than to be a knight, as knights go. The present £500 will help to relieve certain poor and proud but pressing literary cases known to McQueen alone. His expression at this moment was so extraordinary that I entirely fail to fathom it. I have no doubt I shall be able to represent the benevolent and respectable literary agent to perfection. Of course, I shall insist on my 10%. And he began laughing again. But I can't stop to discuss the matter now with you. I'm off. I promised McWing that to be with him at 12 o'clock precisely, and it's now 11:30. I shall probably lunch with him, so don't wait for me. And concerning the 500, you needn't be in my debt an hour longer than you like. I'll take a check for the money back from you this evening. All right, I said, but perhaps the great oracle of the cliques will reject your proposals with scorn. If he does, then is utopia realized, replied Lucio, carefully drawing on his gloves as he spoke. Where's a copy of your book? Ah, here's one, smelling newly of the press, and he slipped the volume into his overcoat pocket. Allow me before departure to express the opinion that you are a singularly ungrateful fellow, Geoffrey. Here am I, perfectly devoted to your interests, and despite my princedom, actually prepared to pose as McQueen as your acting manager pro tem. And you haven't so much as a thank you to throw at me. He stood before me smiling, the personification of kindness and good humor. I laughed a little. McQueen will never take you for an acting manager or literary agent, I said. You don't look it. If I seem churlish, I'm sorry, but the fact is I'm disgusted. At what? He inquired, still smiling. Oh, at that humbug of everything, I answered impatiently. The stupid farce of it all. Why shouldn't a book get noticed on its own merits without any appeal to cliquism and influential wire-pulling on the press? Exactly. And he delicately flicked a grain of dust off his coat while speaking. And why shouldn't a man get received in society on his own merits without any money to recommend him, or any influential friend to back him up? I was flying for a second, but I got that one. Welcome back. The world as it is made, he went on, regarding me fixedly. It is moved by the lowest and the pettiest motives. It works for the most trivial, ridiculous, and perishable aims. It is not a paradise. It is not a happy family of united and affectionate brethren. It is an overpopulated colony of jabbering and quarrelsome monkeys who fancy they are men. Philosophers in old days tried to teach it that the monkey type should be exterminated for the growth and encouragement of the nobler race, but they preached in vain. There never were enough real men alive to overcome the swarming majority of the beasts. God himself, they say, came down from the heavens to try and set wrong things right, and to restore, if possible, his own defaced image to the general aspect of humanity. And even he failed. There's very little of God in this world, I said bitterly. There is much more devil. He smiled. A musing, dreamy smile that transfigured his countenance and made him look like a fine Apollo absorbed in the thought of some new and glorious song. No doubt, he said, after a little pause. Mankind certainly prefer the devil to any other deity. Therefore, if they elect him as their representative, it is scarcely to be wondered at that he governs where he is asked to govern. And yet, do you know, Geoffrey, this devil, if there is one, can hardly, I think, be quite so bad as his detractors say. I myself don't believe he is a whit worse than the 19th century financier. I laughed aloud at the comparison. After that, I said, you'd better go off to go to McWing. I hope you will tell him that I am the triple essence of all the newest discoveries rolled into one. Never fear, returned Lucio. I've learned all my stock phrases by heart. A star of the first magnitude, etc. I've read the Antitheum till I've got the lingo of the literary auctioneer well nigh perfect, and I believe I shall acquit myself admirably. Au revoir. He was gone, and I, after a little desultory looking over my papers, went out to lunch at Arthur's, of which club I was now a member. On my way, I stopped to look in at the bookseller's window to see if my immortal productions was yet on show. It was not. And the volume put most conspicuously to the front among all of the newest books was one entitled Differences by Mavis Clare. Acting on a sudden impulse, I went in to purchase it. Has this a good sale? I asked. The volume was handed to me. The clerk at the counter opened his eyes wide. Sale, he echoed. Well, I should think so, rather. Why, everybody's reading it. Indeed, and I turned over the uncut pages carelessly. I see no allusion whatever to it in the papers. The clerk smiled and shrugged his shoulders. No, and you're not likely to, sir, he said. Miss Clare's too popular to need reviews. Besides, a large number of the critics of the log rollers especially are mad against her for her success, and the public know it. Only the other day, a man came in here from one of the big newspaper offices, told me he was taking a few notes on the books which had the largest sales. Would I tell him which authors' works were most in demand? I said Miss Clare's took the lead, as she does, and he got into a regular rage. Said, that's the answer I've had all along the line, and however true it is, no use to me because I dare not mention it. My editor would instantly scratch it out. He hates Miss Clare. A precious editor you've got, I said. And he looked rather queer. There's nothing like journalism, sir, for the suppression of the truth. I smiled and went away with my purchase, convinced that I had wasted a few shillings on a mere piece of a woman's trash. If this Mavis Clare was indeed so popular, then her work must naturally be of the penny dreadful order, for I, like many other literary men, labored under the ludicrous inconsistency of considering the public an ass, while I myself desired nothing so much as to be said asses, applause, and approval. And therefore, I could not imagine it capable of voluntarily selecting for itself any good work of literature without guidance from the critics. One moment. Oh, good. I thought maybe I was receiving messages there. Of course, I was wrong. The great masses of the public in all the nations are always led by some instinctive sense of right that moves them to reject the false and unworthy and select the true, completely compared, like most men of my type, to sneer and cavil at the book, chiefly because it was written by a feminine hand. I sat down in a retired corner of the club reading room and began to cut the skin of the pages. I had not read many sentences before my heart sank with a heavy sense of fear and jealousy. The slow fire of an insidious envy began to smolder in my mind. What power had so gifted this author, this mere woman, that she could dare to write better than I, and that she could force me by the magic of her pen to mentally acknowledge, albeit with wrath and shame, my own inferiority. Clearness of thought, brilliancy of style, beauty of diction, all these were hers, united to consummate ease of expression and artistic skill. And all at once, in the very midst of reading, such a violent impulse of infinite rage possessed me that I flung the book down, dreading to go on with it. The potent, resistless, unpurchasable quality of genius. I was not yet so blinded by my own conceit as to be unable to recognize that divine fire when I saw it flashing up from every page, as I saw it now, but to be compelled to give that recognition to a woman's work. galled and irritated me almost beyond endurance. Women, I considered, should be kept in their places as men's drudges or as toys, as wives, mothers, nurses, cooks, menders of socks and shirts, and housekeepers generally. What right had they to intrude into the realms of art and snatch the laurels from their masters' brows? If I could but get the chance of reviewing this book, I thought to myself savagely, I would misquote, misrepresent, and cut it to shreds with a joy too great for words. This Mavis Clare, unsexed, as I at once called her in my own mind, simply because she had the power I lacked, wrote what she had to say with a gracious charm, freedom, and innate consciousness of strength, a strength which forced me back upon myself and filled me with the bitterest humiliation. Without knowing her, I hated her, this woman who could win fame without the aid of money, and who was crowned so brightly and visibly to the world that she was beyond criticism. I took up her book again and tried to cavil it. Over one or two dainty bits of poetic simile and sentiment I laughed enviously. When I left the club later in the day, I took the book with me, divided between the curious desire to read it honestly through with justice to it and its author, and an impulse to tear it asunder and fling it into the road to be crushed in the mud under rolling cab and cartwheels. In this strange humor, Jimenez found me, when at about 4 o'clock he returned from his mission to David McWing, smiling and triumphant. "Congratulate me, Geoffrey," he exclaimed as he entered my room. "Congratulate me and yourself. I am minus the £500 cheque I showed you this morning." "McQueen has pocketed then," I said sullenly. "All right, much good may it do him, and to his charity." Jimenez gave a quick, observant glance. "Why, what has happened to you since we parted?" he inquired, throwing off his overcoat and sitting down opposite me. "You seem out of temper. Yet you ought to be a perfectly happy man, for your highest ambition is about to be gratified. You said you wished to make your book and yourself the talk of London. Well, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, you will see yourself praised in every large number of influential newspapers and newest discovered genius of the day, only a little way removed from Shakespeare himself. 3 of the big leading magazines are guaranteed to say that, and all this through the affability of Mr. McWing and the trifling sum of £500. And you are not satisfied? Really, my friend, you are becoming difficult. I warned you that too much good fortune spoils a man." With a sudden movement, I flung down Mavis Clare's book before him. "Look at this," I said. "Does she pay £500 to David McWing's charity?" He took up the volume and glanced at it. "Certainly not, but then she gets slandered, not criticized." "But what does it matter?" I retorted. "The man from whom I bought this book says that everybody is reading it." "Exactly," said Jimenez, surveyed me with curious expression, half of pity, half of amusement. "But you know how the old axiom, my dear Geoffrey. You may lead a horse to the water, but you cannot make him drink, which statement, interpreted for the present occasion, means that those certain log rollers, headed by our estimable friend McWing, may drag the horse, i.e. the public, up to their own particularly prepared literary trough, they cannot force it to swallow the mixture. The horse frequently turns its tail and runs away in search of its own provender. It has done so in the case of Miss Clare. When the public chose an author for themselves, it is a dreadful thing, of course, for other authors, but it really can't be helped." "Why should they choose Mavis Clare?" I demanded gloomily. "Oh, why indeed?" he echoed, smiling. "McQueen—" "One moment, darlings." "Oh, no. I'm paranoid of going offline. Anyway." "Why should they choose Mavis Clare?" I demanded gloomily. "Ah, why indeed?" he echoed. "McWing would tell you that they do it out of sheer idiocy. The public would answer that they chose her because she is genius. Genius, I repeated scornfully. The public are perfectly incapable of recognizing such quality. You think so? He said, still smiling. You really think so? In that case, it's very odd, isn't it? How everything that is truly great in art and literature becomes so widely known and honored, not only in this country, but in every civilized land where people think or study. You must remember that all the very famous men and women have been steadily written down in their day, even to the late English laureate Tennyson, who was criticized for the most part in the purest Billingsgate. It is only the mediocrities who are ever written up. It seems as if the stupid public really had a hand in selecting these great, for the reviewers would never stand them at any price, till driven to acknowledge them by the popular force majeure. But considering the barbarous want of culture and utter foolishness of the public, Geoffrey, what I wonder at is that you should care to appeal to it at all. I sat silent, inwardly chafing under his remarks. I'm afraid, he resumed, rising and taking a white flower from one of the vases on the table to pin in his buttonhole, that Miss Clare is going to be a thorn in your side, my friend. A man rival in literature is bad enough, but a woman's rival is too much to endure with any amount of patience. However, you may console yourself with the certainty that she will never get boomed, while you, thanks to my tender fostering of that sensitive and high-principled McQueen, will be the one delightful and unique discovery of the press for at least 1 month, perhaps 2, which is about as long as any new star for the first magnitude lasts in the latter-day literary skies. Shooting stars, all of them, such as poor, old, forgotten Berenger sang of. Q felon, et dispon, les toilettes que filet. Except Mavis Clare, I said. True, except Mavis Clare, and he laughed aloud, a laugh that jarred upon me because there was a note of mockery in it. She is a small fixture in the vast heavens, or so it seems, revolving very contentedly and smoothly in her own appointed orbit. But she is not, and never will be, attended by the brilliant meteor flames that will burst round you, my excellent fellow, at the signal of McQueen. Fie, Geoffrey, get over your skills. Jealous of a woman? Be ashamed. Is not woman the inferior creature? And shall the mere spectre of feminine fame cause 5-fold millionaire to abase his lofty spirit in the dust? Conquer your strange fit of spleen, Geoffrey, and join me at dinner? He laughed again, and as he left the room, again, his laughter irritated me. When he had gone, I gave way to the base and unworthy impulse that had for some minutes been rankling within me, and sitting down at my writing table, penned a hasty note to the editor of a rather powerful magazine, a man whom I had formerly known and worked for. He was aware of my altered fortunes and the influential position I now occupied, and I felt confident he would be glad to oblige me in any matter he could. My letter, marked private and confidential, contained the request that I must be permitted to write for his next number of anonymous slashing review of the new novel entitled Differences by Mavis Clare. That is where we end for the evening, my darlings. I am so glad that you have joined me. I hope you are enjoying this book, The Sorrows of Satan. A great way of saying thank you is to join me on Patreon. That's the best way. You can find me there at patreon.com/The Gentleman Psychic. You can find me on PayPal, on Venmo, and various other means of support. And also your likes, your comments, your shares, they do help this channel. I do need to get back into the swing of things. I've been away, but things have been a little bit chaotic. Anyway, lovelies, I hope you've had a good evening, and thank you for joining me. Have a good night.